watching Sharri.
Good evening. Well, Victoria has a new premier tonight and voters didn't get a say. Ben Carroll has been up to his neck in the rotten state, but he wants you to believe he's a clean slate. Journalist John Ferguson will take us inside Labor's Night of the Long Knives. And James Patterson joins us live. He has a warning about Pauline Hanson and populist parties. Plus, the admission inflation is out of control as the RBA flags a fourth rate rise next month. And the leaked rich list of A-listers Zoran Mamdani is planning to tax. I'll tell you some of the big names a little later. But first tonight, it was a happy day for many Victorians as Jacinta Allan was rolled as Premier. But she leaves a broken state in her wake. Spiralling debt, a crime wave, the economy down the toilet and businesses struggling. She couldn't run the state and she certainly couldn't run her own party. Chaos, disorganisation, backstabbing and rivalries all were exposed today in a bloody leadership coup where she was rolled. Just 4 months out from the election, the Labor Party has imploded. Now, this was far from a clean handover to Ben Carroll. In an unexpected move, Jacinta's factional ally, Sonia Kilkenny, put up her hand to nominate. The prospect of a drawn-out, rank-and-file ballot loomed. After a tense couple of hours, common sense prevailed and Ben Carroll emerged victorious. But just weeks ago, he insisted he was the loyal deputy.
I've got a young daughter at home and I couldn't be more proud to make sure she grows up knowing that I supported Jacinta Allan to be a world-class Premier and get re-elected in her own right.
But by today, feminism and his daughter were forgotten and he was the Premier. In his first press conference, he claimed he hadn't misled Victorians, that it wasn't his decision to dump the Premier. It was all down to some anonymous delegation.
The circumstances changed. Yesterday morning, I was approached by a delegation who asked me to stand for leader. This delegation had already visited the Premier and informed her that they wanted change. I'm going to be that change.
It beggars belief that he had no knowledge of this. And this followed a concerted campaign to oust Jacinta Allan. Now, Ben Carroll does have one thing in common with the woman he rolled. He's the Premier no one elected, no one voted for. And this leadership change will do little to help Labor. Because it's not just Jacinta Allan who's dragging down the vote. It's the stale and rotten Labor Party that's been running Victoria into the ground with disastrous policies. I mean, one example, forcing employees to have a mandatory 2 days working from home. Now, Jacinta Allan referenced this today as an important part of her legacy.
We're making working from home a right that your boss can't take away.
But this will suffocate businesses already struggling to stay afloat in an impossible economic climate. Jacinta Allan departs as Premier with numerous scandals and disasters in her wake. Her legacy includes the Big Build integrity scandal, cancelling the Commonwealth Games, and she was the minister, Victoria's record debt, reckless spending, soaring crime, break-ins and gangs, the costly suburban rail loop. Well, and that's just the start. And then there was the way she rejected accountability in moments like this.
That transgender kids are 15 times more likely to commit suicide. So I would hope, Rachel...
That figure is heavily disputed.
Well, you're going to dispute the higher rates of suicide amongst transgender kids. Rachel, I am not going to engage with you on this.
Of course, Allan described her legacy in a much rosier light today, and she insists she would have won the leadership ballot. She said the gig had been tough, and she became pretty emotional when speaking about her difficult childbirth.
I've lived with endometriosis and I almost lost my daughter at birth. You all know I'm a bit of a crier, so I led a government. I led a government that listened to girls about their health.
She took no questions after that press conference. She would have been pretty happy to turn her back on the media. Now, Ben Carroll tried to distance himself from the toxic past premiers and their toxic record. He announced today a royal commission into the construction sector.
I am not Daniel Andrews. I am not Jacinta Allen. I will do things differently because different times require a new approach.
And he promised to crack down on crime and form a partnership with the business community. Promises no one believes that have come too little too late. But journalist John Ferguson, the associate editor of The Australian, he put it bluntly today when he said Victoria and the national economy will be better off without Jacinta Allen. In a brutal piece, he writes that Allen has been arguably the most anti-business premier Victoria has had in decades, overseeing the trashing of the state's global reputation. Virtually every seriously bad decision linked to this government can be traced back to Allen in one way or another, either as a minister or a premier. The Commonwealth Games is hers and so is the big build. And he jokingly writes that maybe there is a political God, and he'll be on the show shortly. But this is an absolute gift in many ways to the Liberals and to Jess Wilson, who today said this.
Different leader, sure, but same corruption, same crime, same debt, same waste, same potholes, same failed services, same old Labor.
Yeah, this could all benefit the opposition leader Jess Wilson. An election victory is certainly not in the bag. The polls are tight. But having seen off Jacinta Allen, she's in with her best shot yet. And the Deputy Opposition Leader, David Southwick, will also be on the show a bit later. But now let's turn to the economy, the national economy. RBA Governor Michelle Bullock had a warning today that no family wants to hear. That living standards will continue to fall, households will face another rate rise likely within weeks, and inflation is still a major problem. Bullock says that Australian living standards will continue to stagnate until the fundamental challenge of weak productivity growth is addressed.
But inflation, as we know, has since increased and it's now above target. Indeed, it was rising and above target even before the recent oil price rises. The board is prepared to act as required to achieve its mandate, including by increasing the cash rate further if needed.
All right, and joining me to discuss this and, of course, the Victorian politics today is Shadow Defence Minister James Patterson. James, great to see you. Look, the Governor was very clear there in warning that there could be a fourth interest rate rise at the board meeting on August 11. And that is a prospect that will alarm every family, given the cost of living, high petrol prices, high power bills, high grocery items.
That's right, Sharri. It's very bleak news for households today in hearing that warning from the RBA Governor. I think most Australians had thought that the recent round of rate rises under Labor had come to a conclusion and that was going to stay at this level at least for some time, if not be reduced in the future. I think it would be a massive psychological blow for a lot of Australian families and for our economy if there is another rate rise, and it will be directly linked to Labor's inability to control spending. They are spending at record highs as a proportion of our economy, and that is driving up inflation and driving up interest rates. And Jim Chalmers and Anthony Albanese are directly responsible for this if it happens.
I mean, I just played that comment, but she was very pointed when she said that inflation was a problem before the recent oil prices. So she's really pretty clever in not letting the government off the hook there.
And earlier this year, the RBA governor made very clear that fiscal policy, that is the tax and spend settings of the Albanese government, is putting upward pressure on inflation, and that if the federal government did not do more to rein in spending, then the RBA would have no choice but to increase interest rates. So make no mistake, they will own any interest rate rise from here.
I want to return to your state of Victoria. Of course, Ben Carroll sought to address voter concerns today by calling that Royal Commission and signalling action in other areas. Do you think voters will buy this message that it's a new era?
Well, today Ben Carroll said that he's not Daniel Andrews and he's not Jacinta Allen. That's true, but he was an accomplice of Daniel Andrews and an accomplice of Jacinta Allen. He was Jacinta's deputy premier. He sat around the cabinet table with both of them for almost a decade, and every decision this government has made, which has put Victoria in the parlous state that it is, including refusing to call a Royal Commission until today, he owns. He took part in, he stood shoulder to shoulder with Jacinta Allen and Daniel Andrews on those decisions. And the only reason that he has backflipped today and the government has allowed him to backflip is not because they've had a sincere change of heart, not because they've suddenly become concerned about corruption 2 years after these revelations started by Nick McKenzie in The Age. It's because they've realised it's become a political problem for them, and in an ultimate act of cynicism, they're hoping to manage that political problem by calling a Royal Commission, which they hope will report long, long into the future when they're gone from public office.
Yeah, I mean, they couldn't be having the daily hearings during an election campaign. There's no way they'd do that. Look, I'm interested, James, and you're obviously very close to Jess Wilson's campaign because your lovely wife works for her. Do you think this change in leader today makes it tougher or easier for Jess Wilson to win the election in November?
Jacinta Allen had 71% of Victorians who disapproved of the way she was doing her job. So anybody who replaces her would you presumably help lift the Labor Party vote by a little bit at least, and it might narrow the contest a bit more. But fundamentally, I think Victorians will look at this government that's had 12 years in office as a tired, old, corrupt government that has allowed our state to fall into complete disrepair. The potholes that litter the roads, the community safety and crime crisis, the investment that's fleeing Victoria, the highest unemployment rate in the nation, the $200 billion of debt that we're hurtling towards. They'll look at that and they'll think, Ben Carroll helped make that mess. He can't clean up this mess. Only a fresh start with Jess Wilson and her Liberal and National team and their plan will turn this state around.
But even with that shocking record, I mean, the polls are very tight. So if Ben Carroll does lift them slightly, I mean, it could be the case, couldn't it, that they win in November?
Well, depending on the polls, Labor is polling in the low 20s to mid-20s. He would have to lift their primary vote by a lot to put Labor in a competitive position, certainly before they could even dream of returning to majority government. But we take nothing for granted. We understand that there is a contest to be had here. There is a case to be made, and that's why Jess travelled around the whole state. She visited every single one of the 88 lower house seats across the state, whether they were safe Labor seats or not, to listen to people, to feedback into her plan to turn this state around.
I just want to turn to the important speech that you gave a few days ago, where you warned against voters supporting populist parties, including One Nation. You said the danger is these anti-establishment parties don't just mind grievance about poor economic performance. Whether on the populist left or right, they bring with them a much broader wagon of grudges and resentments. And they are most often defined by a total lack of regard for our institutions more broadly. Now, you know, clearly you made these remarks because Conservative voters are turning to Pauline Hanson, who's, of course, appearing on Paul Murray right after my show tonight. So what's your message to voters about One Nation?
There's 3 quick points to make here, Sharri. First is our primary political opponents are and always have been the Labor Party, but One Nation is a political competitor and they deserve reasonable scrutiny when they make mistakes, and I want to see that happen. The second thing is understand why voters are angry, why they're angry with the political system, why they're angry with us, why they want change. But the third and most important point is that while you might want change and you might want to break the system, you've got to be careful about how you vote for change because you might end up breaking more than you want to, including the precious inheritance of Western civilisation, those British institutions. And you'll be voting for, as I said, a grab bag of grievances. Just look at the comments that Malcolm Roberts that have been exposed over the last few weeks. This is a person who said that the Bondi terror attack was possibly an inside job. He shared an anti-Semitic cartoon on his social media. He's described the United States as the world's greatest terrorist organisation. He's even endorsed someone who is a 9/11 truther and a school shooting denier. These are really extreme out there views, and Malcolm Roberts is not some random candidate. He's been serving in the Senate as Pauline Hanson's right-hand man for a decade.
And do you think
she has not
Pauline's had
repudiated
enough
for him for this.
scrutiny
There's been no
about...
consequences for this.
Do you think she's had enough scrutiny about these views of Malcolm Roberts?
No, Pauline Hanson is very rarely asked questions about this at all because she very rarely fronts up for tough media interviews and scrutiny. And when she is asked about them, she just fobs them off and tries to move on. She needs to be held account as someone who says she wants to be Prime Minister of this country after the next election, who wants to have a one-nation government. A one-nation government with Malcolm Roberts in around the cabinet table would jeopardise our US alliance, would put our national security at risk. What portfolio would Malcolm Roberts serve in? Would he be the Foreign Minister? Would he be the Defence Minister? Would he be the Home Affairs Minister? There should be consequences for the things he has said if Pauline Hanson disagrees with them. I mean, this is someone who's also attacked AUKUS. This is someone who's also said that the US Air Force is putting chemicals on the US people as some sort of experiment. This is wild and wacky stuff. I think there should be consequences. It's up to Pauline to decide what those consequences are. It's up to her to decide what she will tolerate. Well, I'm not here to run one nation for one nation. That's a decision. Well, I wouldn't want to have a colleague with views like that. I wouldn't want to share a party room with a colleague who had extreme views like that. If Pauline chooses to share the company of Malcolm Roberts, to value him on an ongoing basis as a colleague, then that reflects on her and the kind of government that she would lead if she were to form a government after the next election.
All right, and of course we'll hear what she has to say on Paul Murray's show after this. James Patterson, thank you very much for joining us as always. And let's bring in tonight's panel, former Labor State Secretary Cameron Milner and former Victorian Liberal Party President Michael Kroger. I mean, I want to go back to Victoria, but Michael, I just want to get your views on James Patterson's argument there. He is the most eloquent and convincing performer, arguably, from the federal coalition. He just mounted an argument for why voters should be supporting the coalition and not one nation. What did you think about what he had to say?
Well, I thought he was absolutely right. Look, One Nation are a grievance party, and we understand a lot of the grievances. We share a lot of their grievances. But here in Victoria, there's no leader, no policies, no candidates. I mean, this is not serious down here. We're talking about running a serious trillion-dollar economy down here, and they don't even have a leader. So on his substantive points, yeah, Malcolm Roberts, his comment about the US being the world's leading terrorist country, I mean, seriously? And look, I don't think at a federal level you can be taken seriously unless you have a serious economic policy, and One Nation don't have that, and therefore they're disqualified from being a party of government. And as for that poll today that came out where I saw that they want to get 60 seats at the federal election, they're not going to get 60 seats or anything like it. I respect Pauline Hanson for what she's been through, what she's achieved. She's a person of great courage, clearly, and she's been right on a number of serious issues. There's no doubt about that, which underpins her vote. But you have to move from grievance to being a substantive party of government, and I don't think One Nation have done that, and I don't think they can do it.
Cameron, it's a tricky line for the coalition to walk. I mean, the more they criticise Pauline, the more voters sympathise with her because they hate how she's always being bullied. That's how they perceive it. But they do have to mount an argument for why voters should support them, you know, as James Patterson just did.
Well, that's right. But, I mean, Australian politics is now a three-way cage fight. I mean, you know, three will enter, only one will get out. I mean, they're fighting each other as much as they are Labor. And this is the conundrum for the coalition. It's a one-nation coalition. To your point, Michael, people are voting One Nation in droves in Victoria. They're not voting for Jess. They're voting for One Nation even without a leader. Because they're fed up with the Liberals who sit in the Athenaeum Club going, oh, tut, tut, those poor people. Oh, they can't possibly be voting Labor. They can't be possibly voting One Nation. They are, Michael. They are. And the reality is Jess Wilson has not engaged with voters out there. Voters are angry and voters are voting for One Nation in droves. And the only way Jess Wilson gets to govern in Victoria after November 30 is with One Nation's support. And that's a huge problem for the Victorian Liberal Party.
Quick response to that, Michael?
I'm not sure about that. As a result of today's change, I think ultimately the Liberal Party will be stronger. not in the short term, but closer to the election. So I don't accept that we can't win 16 seats net, Cameron.
I mean, surely the change today, fine, you know, Ben Carroll isn't the despised figure that Jacinta Allen was, but Cameron, it is still Labor's record, and this is the Labor Party's own acknowledgement of how badly they've stuffed up, that they've had to dump their own premier.
Well, that's right. I mean, I think the thing is here that I think Carroll gives them a chance. You know, it doesn't guarantee it, Michael, to your point, OK? But it gives them a huge chance to dump the legacy of Andrews. Allen came in being too mendicant to Andrews' faults and foibles. So dump Allen, dump Andrews, give voters a royal commission on the CFMEU, give them a choice, give them change. And that's actually the opportunity Labor's got. To your point earlier, Sharri, in the show, the polls are still really close for Labor. So despite Jacinta Allen being, you know, unbelievably unpopular, Labor is still actually competitive in Victoria. And with a stronger leader who actually dumps the legacy, does the Royal Commission and gets on with things, I think it'd actually be very competitive in only a few weeks' time.
I mean, Michael, Greg Sheridan wrote a fascinating piece today about populist parties, and he was kind of arguing that those on the extreme left are more dangerous than the populist parties on the right, and figures like Pauline Hanson and Nigel Farage. And you know, Michael, we've seen that with Zoran Mamdani, who's introduced state-run grocery stores. So, you know, what did you think of this argument?
Well, Sheridan, as usual, is completely right. And of course, the extreme left are more dangerous than the hard right, for all the reasons we know. And I never use the word communist because I think it's, you know, a bit naff, because it implies mass killings like Mao. And that's why I never refer to people like Mandami, etc., as communists. But in an economic policy sense, opening grocery stores, really? Someone who ran Burke's ACTU store down here in Melbourne should give him a ring and tell him that this is the height of absurdity. He'll send every other grocer broke. He'll send other cafes and things broke. I mean, this is childish policy. This guy's just a rank amateur. But here's the problem in America, that the American Democrat, the American centre-left voter, blames Biden and Clinton and Harris for not beating Trump. And they think the traditional centrist Democrats are not good enough to beat Trump. So they've moved to the left to a far more aggressive stance against Trump. And that's why this is happening, because conventional Democratic opposition to Donald Trump has failed on 2 occasions, or 3, if you believe President Trump.
I just think, thank God, Mamdani wasn't born in the United States so that he can't run for president, because it seems like I do not understand the widespread support among some people for him. It really just flummoxes me. I mean, Cameron, you saw some of this similar ideology at the Labor Party conference in Adelaide on the weekend, didn't you? Some of this radical left ideology. I mean, not all of those proposals got up, but the ideology was still there.
It is, and I think Sheridan's article was excellent today because, I mean, you know, everyone sort of says, oh, the hard right, they're neo-Nazis, they're this and that. But for goodness sake, the lefties, the hard lefties, wearing in cafes and being anti-Israel, anti-Jewish and anti-Semitic, you know, they think that's all okay. That's somehow cool to be a lefty and be an anti-Semite. It's not, Sharri. It's disgusting. It's despicable. They should be called out for it. And so, to your point, the Labor Party conference had a lot of stuff being brought to the conference floor. It might not have got through the factional Daleks and the control at the top that Albanese was enforcing, but the fact they got there as motions, the fact that they're out there being debated, shows you where the rank and file of the Labor Party are moving to. And I think this is Sheridan's article. Sheridan's point is, as the right parties move further to the right, there isn't a centrist party coming through the middle. The lefties are getting harder left, and that's a real worry for our body politic.
I mean, you even look at the Prime Minister. I don't think we've ever had such a far-left Prime Minister. Everyone fell for Albanese's shtick that he'd moved into the centre. He never moved into the centre. He just pretended to. It's bizarre.
Correct.
Now, we were all focused on this Labor caucus meeting today, but there's a much more important meeting that's about to happen, which, of course, is President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. They're going to meet face-to-face about the Iran war. Bibi's gone over to Washington. The war is at a crossroads yet again. Now, Michael, Bibi is reportedly pushing for regime change in Tehran. That's just according to the reports. Where do you think this is heading?
So the first thing I'd say is I think Trump's vote has bottomed out. So people say it's an unpopular war and it's doing a lot of damage. I think the damage has been done. in his polls. And despite the war going on, he is still favourite to control the Senate after the midterms in November. That is the most important thing for him domestically. He's going to lose the House, but he has to control the Senate. And at the minute, he is still favoured, perhaps to lose 2 Senate seats, but not the 4 that the Democrats need. So I think that's probably giving him strength.
Yeah.
As to the point about regime change, well, how? We all favour regime change in Iran. It can only be done internally. Now, allegedly, there was an attempt to get Ahmadinejad on side. Trump has referred to the fact that they gave guns to people in Iran and they kept them without detailing who that was. I presume it was the Kurds in the north. But how is regime going to be brought about unless there is serious domestic opposition? Because the opposition in Iran don't have any weapons. So he can say he wants regime change all he likes. Well, the Americans are not going to put boots on the ground. So unless the Israelis do, or unless they arm a militia, I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah. All right. Cameron Milner, Michael Kroger, thank you so much. And let's return to the big news today. Of course, the Victorian Premier being rolled, and the Australian's Associate Editor John Ferguson. He joins me now. He argued today that Jacinta Allen could have turned her government towards the middle centrist road, but instead she blindly went on with reckless spending. John, great to see you. Terrific piece. Do you think voters will buy Ben Carroll's argument that, you know, he had nothing to do with the toxic record of the past decade?
I don't think they'll necessarily buy that he had no connection, but I think that Labor is still capable of winning this next election. I think it's probably you'd have to guess that it's going to be a Liberal one nation minority, but I think getting rid of Jacinta Allen, in my view, Jacinta Allen was the worst Premier I've seen in decades. So they've probably done the right thing for Labor's position. But it's very complicated down here, Sharri. It's not like anything we've seen before.
Why? Because of the rise of One Nation?
Yeah, look, One Nation, talk about the rise of One Nation. News poll this week has got One Nation coming off from its peak down into the teens. So it looks like it's heading towards Greens numbers if it keeps coming off the way it is. I think One Nation, and I argued in Monday's paper that I think One Nation is overstated as a force in Victoria, but that doesn't mean it won't do well, for example, in the upper house. But I think it's more nuanced, and Newspoll would suggest that it's going to be a coalition v Labor contest more than, but you know, it's still November 28th. So yeah. I'm withholding judgment.
Yeah, look, Ben Carroll today in his first press conference, he clearly sought to frame the coalition as in partnership with One Nation, and he was pushed on this line that he'd promised his daughter he wouldn't stand against Jacinta Allen. You know, a number of journalists asked him about that. He just said circumstances have changed. Is that going to fly?
Oh, look, I think it will. I think all that discussion gets drowned out by reality. And so, you know, potential Royal Commission, Labor's legacy, it's a bad legacy in lots of ways, certainly fiscally. I think One Nation is still going to be a big part of the story because I think it's this is, as John Howard said, it's the Massachusetts of Australia down here. So I think the city is going to be problematic for the coalition and One Nation, but it's just going to be really, really interesting, Sharri. I think I had a pollster contacted me today and said that I kept the numbers that the coalition primary is going to have to be well above the 31% it is at the moment in order for them to win. Yeah. You know, we're all having bets, but I think Labor's well in this race.
Just very quickly, just finally, I mean, you know, you've spoken about the legacy of Jacinta Allen and how bad it is, which it 100% is. Why do you think her legacy is worse than Dan Andrews?
Oh, look, I don't think it's worse, but I think it's different. I think that he was a much more, and I use this word carefully, but it was a much more substantial politician. She was just a degrader who came in after him and had the opportunity to reset the government, and she never did. So I think that what needed to happen in 2023 was a total reset, get away from everything that Andrews did. She was incapable of doing that. Now, does that make it worse than Andrews? Look, probably not, but I think that she was a total failure and she's the worst I've seen. So whereas Andrews was much more nuanced and complicated than that. So, but it's you could write a thesis about Andrews.
Well, maybe
really.
maybe you'll write a book, Ferg. Maybe you'll write a book. the worst premiers Australia has seen. All right, thanks so much for joining me. Still to come, the Western world gripped by terror attacks as former ISIS fighters want to return to Australia. And Angus Taylor has been named in the corruption hearings today. I'll tell you why after the break. Well, there were corruption hearings today in New South Wales, and it emerged that the New South Wales Liberals discussed seeking financial backing for a breakaway right-wing faction from Angus Taylor. There were text messages discussing a plan to have Taylor donate $15,000 to a group that they called Reformers.
Dallas has told me he got the commitment from Angus for the $15K injection plus a $3K monthly donation, !
Yes, I see that.
I take it you don't recall sending this message?
I don't know.
And you indicated you didn't recall Mr. Taylor making a financial contribution?
No.
In other text messages, the Catholic Schools New South Wales boss Dallas McInerney spoke about shaking down Angus Taylor.
He says because he wants, and I quote, to shake down Angus for $10,000. Do you see that?
I do.
Do you know who the Angus is that Mr. McInerney is referring to here?
Oh, I would assume it's Angus Taylor.
And the editor of the Daily Telegraph, Ben English, joins me now, as always, on a Tuesday. Good to see you, Ben.
You too.
What have been the biggest revelations here so far?
Well, they've gone after the ex-premier and now they've mentioned the opposition leader. So they're going after the big names early. It's often what our ICAC does, is to grab the headlines. And in both cases, there's no suggestion there's any wrongdoing by either man. But it's still, by dint of being mentioned at the ICAC, it's massively damaging, and this is the last thing that Angus Taylor needs, to be dragged into this, which is going to basically go for 2 months. And so it's not good for his brand.
I mean, that's the issue I've always had with ICAC, is they look for the headlines, the front page, the splashy news. Well, are there actually any findings about Angus Taylor? And if not, why are you smearing his name? And the same with Dominic Perrottet.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and they'll have to justify that because they didn't qualify. There were no caveats next to the mention of them. And, of course, it is highly damaging. And what they're going to have to establish is that there was actually, that this was clearly wrong, what was done. And I don't think they've got there yet. What they're going to have to establish is that the money that went through from the Catholic schools through this mob that the Reformers set up, and also from Jean Nassif, was specifically for the purpose of branch stacking and was falsified to be for other means. They haven't done that yet.
So that's what this is all about. A dodgy property developer giving donations that they're going to argue ultimately wound up involved somehow in the Liberal Party. I mean, they haven't established that yet.
That is right, and the branch stacking actually is it's essentially a miniature of what is wrong with the Liberal Party writ large. So basically, you had this group called the Reformers. They were hardcore conservatives. It's not really philosophical. It's just they were just a different group to the centre right. They wanted to destroy the centre right, so they tried to basically saturate all the branches in the Hills district, that's northwest of Sydney, with people that are friendly to them, and they used money to do it, is the allegation.
Centre-right people probably don't know, but this is Scott Morrison's faction they were coming after.
Yeah, Alex Hawke.
Scott Morrison faction.
Yep.
All right, let's move on to this fascinating story, front page of the New York Post, about Zoran Mamdani, that a rich list with the names and addresses of New York A-listers has been leaked on the New York City Department of Finance's website. And it's hundreds of celebrities who could be caught up in this annual extra tax on second homes.
Yeah.
I mean, among the A-listers, Cynthia Nixon, who backed, by the way, Mamdani, Anna Wintour, Taylor Swift, Woody Allen,
Yeah, I mean, most of them would have been enthusiastic Mamdani supporters, so the irony is delicious. But it's called a Pierre de Terre tax. So only in New York, and only a socialist in New York would tax a penthouse and then send the bill in French. But yeah, it's highly ironic that these are the sort of the most enthusiastic supporters of Mamdani, and they're getting hammered. And that's what happens, is that socialists will keep taxing you until they run out of your money.
Yeah, shocking, honestly. Pauline Hanson has updated her registry to finally declare who paid for her trip to Italy and the fashion show.
OK, so she's done this tonight, and she's revealed that Gina Reinhardt, the iron ore magnate billionaire, paid for her European trips and also the tickets to the flash Dolce and Gabbana fashion show. Was it in Milan? It was in Italy.
Wasn't it in Sicily?
Oh, was it in Sicily? OK, thank you. You're more versed.
Or was it Taormina? I don't know.
It was Italy. And so she's come out with it. People were speculating about what Gina... She didn't... Actually, what she didn't declare was her trip from Australia to the UK. So it's just the European flights and the fashion show. And I think a lot of people will hyperventilate over that. I mean, what I would say is that, you know, Pauline, she declared the trip.
But if that means that taxpayers paid for her to go to Europe, you'd think there'd be some outrage about that.
She would have to declare that.
She'll have, yeah.
So she must have paid for it herself. But I mean, it's interesting because you look at with the controversy over Albanese and the Chinese businessman and the Point Piper. So she's declared the trip, he's declared amnesia. So
good line. Show us your front page tomorrow, Ben.
Oh, OK. This is actually a really worrying one. So.
I think we're going to bring it up on screen.
Hopefully, yeah, it is. Burbs go kaboom. So basically, one of the gangland task force has found this incredibly disturbing cache of weaponry in a so-called safe house, and it included semi-automatic assault rifles, shotguns, 1,000 bits of bullets and so forth, but most chillingly, it includes 6 live grenades.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, what this shows is it's just escalated. I mean, when we first started covering the gangland crimes, they were doing each other over with pistols. This is a serious escalation of the gangland war in Sydney.
Yeah, lucky they found it. Ben, thank you so much. Look forward to reading the paper tonight and tomorrow.
Cheers. Thanks, Sharri.
See you. Still to come, has Albanese been given a free pass on the latest ISIS scandal? Plus, how will the coalition respond to new Premier Ben Carroll? Will the Deputy Opposition Leader David Southwick will join me after the break. Welcome back, and let's return to today's top story that the panicked Victorian Labor government imploded, dumping their leader ahead of the November election. And for more, I'm joined by Deputy Opposition Leader David Southwick. David, would you have preferred to face the unpopular Jacinta Allen at the polls? David, have you got me? Can David hear us?
Sorry, Sharri, I'm not hearing you at the moment. So I will kick off, though, and just say that we have a complete dysfunctional government at the moment. A government that has changed the leader but hasn't changed much else because it's still part of the same team. A government that are so focused on themselves, and we have a situation where nobody is looking after Victorians at the moment, and we're seeing literally a new Premier that was the partner in crime of Jacinta Allen, just like Jacinta Allen was a partner in crime for Daniel Andrews. Nothing's going to change in Victoria with Ben Carroll in charge. We're going to get more of the same, and unfortunately, Victorians are not going to get the kinds of change that they deserve. This has been a great state, but been led so poorly by, firstly, Daniel Andrews, the unelected Jacinta Allen, and now Ben Carroll is just more of the same.
Right, David Southwick, I think we're going to come back to you in a moment because we're going to make sure you can actually hear my questions. But right now I want to turn to the fact that in the past few days, there have been a spate of disturbing attacks, some terror around the world. In Berlin, we saw an extremist driving a van into Berlin's Pride Festival on Saturday night, killing 1, injuring 29. And shockingly, he'd only just been released from prison for trying to join ISIS. Then over in Paris, 3 women, including one who was pregnant, were stabbed by a suspect who reportedly said, "It is Allah who commanded me." Then in New York, a man accused of stabbing a Jewish and Asian man reportedly yelled out Allah Akbar during the attack. And then in Toronto, 2 Jewish bakeries and the US consulate were shot at in shocking attacks only a day apart. This is a concerning global trend, and former AFP detective David Craig joins me now. David, there does seem to be this wave of Islamist attacks around the world, Bondi allegedly included.
Yes, Sharri, and this is going to continue and it is going to get worse. I said right after the Bondi shooting, if that wasn't a wake-up call for Australia to fundamentally change the way our courts, our laws and our politicians approach counter-terrorism matters, particularly radical Islam, then we are in for a lot more hurt. And it's coming. I mean, the offender in Berlin was released on a suspended sentence under a youth justice program after being convicted for terrorism. So he wasn't released after he served his time. He was released because they considered he wasn't a risk. I mean, you need to call these things out. The courts need to be able to identify risk without fear of offending people or communities.
I mean, I think it also, just the spate of these attacks and just, you know, how closely they occurred together, it makes you think that this isn't really an issue, radical Islam, that any country is dealing with on its own. This is a global problem. And you know, I don't think any world leaders are thinking hard enough about how to deal with this.
No, we're not. And obviously, you know, the radicalisation online of younger offenders is going to increase. So obviously, you know, radicalisation online is a very hard thing to police. I'm pleased the AFP has been given some additional funding to try and abate that influence, but it's going to be in place in 2 years' time. I think that's way too late. We need to be more flexible and more adaptable to our environment.
Yeah.
A young offender released today, or a young alleged offender released today in Victorian court on terrorism charges on continued bail. Again, I hope the justice got it right, because if she didn't, it's a real risk, and we need to really fundamentally change the way we approach this.
And this at the same time as there's discussions, of course, about ISIS fighters, not just the ISIS brides, but ISIS fighters returning to Australia. Now, David, you're concerned that the Albanese government will need to provide housing for any of the ISIS brides who've returned. I mean, is this right, and should taxpayers be funding this?
Well, of course, it's completely wrong. I just don't know what alternative the government has if they're going to welcome back these brides of hate into Australia and not. I expect that they can't support themselves, and I can't imagine them getting a job anywhere. I expect that Centrelink and housing departments will be providing accommodation for them, while there's struggling Australians who are working and watching this show right now that haven't broken the law, that they can't afford a house. They can't afford the accommodation or the rent. I mean, it's completely bizarre.
Yeah, yeah. Now, the ISIS fighters, we learnt about one of them last week thanks to the Australian, the so-called Dr. Jihad. What do you think the government needs to do to make sure he doesn't return home? I mean, they don't seem to even be willing to engage in this conversation, but what should they be doing?
Well, we need to be recording as much evidence as we can for a start. Like today, it's been revealed that it's alleged that he has contacts within senior members of ISIS. Now, that changes a lot for the prosecution and the risk assessment. If he's eventually welcomed back here, like every other ISIS associate by the Labor government, when he gets back here, it'll affect the prosecution. What should be happening right now is a temporary exclusion order should be done up, and if Tony Burke is serious that we don't meet the legal threshold, then Parliament needs to be recalled. This is a matter of national security. This is 13 ISIS terrorist fighters coming back into our country. Now, what would our forefathers have said that fought in many wars to protect this nation? Exactly. To see a government just roll up the white flag and say, well, you know, you might hate us, but we're just going to let you back in. Change the laws. That's what governments do. Protect us.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for your time, David Craig. And after the break, we'll return to the Deputy Opposition Leader to learn how the Coalition will respond to the new Premier. That's next. Okay, welcome back, and let's go now again to the Deputy Opposition Leader, David Southwick in Victoria. David, thanks for joining me again. Now, the question is, the polls are very tight. Would you govern with One Nation?
Well, we will ensure that Victorians vote for us because we believe that we need to win in our own right. And it is really important that we spend the next few months explaining to Victorians that the only way to change the government is to vote for us. And that's why we've had Jess Wilson embark on a tour right across the state.
Yeah, James Patterson told us about the listening. Yeah, James Patterson told us about the listening to a bit earlier. But the way the polls are sitting, and we've heard commentary tonight that you might only be in a position to govern if you form a coalition with One Nation. So, you know, you're the Deputy Opposition Leader. Would you be prepared to do that?
Look, we're focused on our job, and I think that's what Victorians expect. And between now and the 28th of November, we will work each and every day to ensure we're listening to Victorians and explaining why they should elect a Jess Wilson government. And that's really important. We shouldn't have to be relying on anybody to, we have a partner, and that is the National Party, and that's our focus, to ensure we have a Liberal national government come November. And we want to explain to each and every Victorian that the only way to change the government is to vote for Jess Wilson. Don't divide your vote, focus on that. And we believe that we can govern with a strong majority, because let's look at Sharri, what's just happened in the last period. We've got a chaotic government. We've got a government that is so focused on themselves and that are not governing, and people have had enough. People have had a gutful. And I think it is incumbent on us to
And yet the polls are still very close, and there is the possibility that Labor could still win. I mean, don't voters deserve to know whether you would be prepared to do an alliance with One Nation?
I think what voters want to know is what we're going to do differently, how we're going to tackle the crime issues, how we're going to ensure that we have a real Royal Commission, not a fake Royal Commission that the Premier has now suggested that they're finally going to do. We will ensure that people know exactly what they will be voting for come November, and we will be ready to actually do the work. We won't waste any time, and we'll get Victoria to where it once was. This was the best state in the nation, and that's what we want to focus on, to ensure we can deliver that again under a Jess Wilson government.
Because of the tech issues, we're now really crunched for time. I did want to ask you about, I've learned that Victorian police are investigating 3 anti-Semitic incidents at a Monash health site. The Chief Executive, I've obtained a letter that he wrote where he said he's appalled to inform you that 3 abhorrent incidents have recently occurred. Now, I've heard this might have involved swastikas allegedly graffitied by a staff member. David, what do you know about this?
It's only just been brought to my attention as well, Sharri. This is horrific. Again, we're just seeing this happening time and time again on our streets. We need consequences for these kinds of things. No more inquiries. We have royal commissions again on hate and anti-Semitism that we've been calling for. What we're seeing in Melbourne needs to change. And we need to ensure that those people that commit these kinds of offences are held to account. Enough is enough. The Jewish community has been through enough in Victoria, and to see these things in our health system, that needs to change. It's the first job for the Premier. Let's see what the Premier's going to do to ensure that we don't have swastikas happening in our health facilities, and that proper consequences happen for those people that are responsible for it.
Yeah, indeed. Look, I'm so sorry we are short on time. It would have been a longer interview, of course, except for the tech issue. But
we'll do it again next time.
We will indeed, David Southwick. Really appreciate your time tonight. Thank you. And that's it from me. And don't go anywhere, because up now, Paul Murray with Pauline Hanson. Please explain. Good night.